Mr. President.
Senator from California is recognized.
Mr. President, I know we're working our way through a series of votes. Many people are at lunch or wrapping up lunch. We have a little bit of business still ahead of us. But I want to take a minute just to remind this body what has transpired here over the last 24 hours. Evidence again, actions again, demonstrating that Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress are stopping at nothing to attack California for the audacity of working to protect the health of Californians and for having the audacity to lead the clean energy economy. But as I've said repeatedly over the last couple of days, it's not just what Donald Trump's EPA and Senate Republicans are doing that's problematic. It's how they made this possible by fundamentally changing how the Senate operates through rules changes last night. Yeah, it was not a magic trick. Before dinner yesterday, these bills to gut California's Clean Air Act authority were recognized as regular bills, subject to the filibuster rule, requiring 60 votes to move forward, open to full debate and amendments. But somehow after dinner time yesterday, once Senate Republicans were done with overruling the parliamentarian, these bills were now not subject to the filibuster. For the record and for the public's recognition, this is the first time in Senate history that the majority has used a nuclear option to take joint resolutions that were subject to the filibuster 1 minute and eliminated the filibuster for them the next. You may hear them try to deny it, but it's all on the record, so let me recap. The Senate parliamentarian, through the chair, confirmed that all points of order waived during a Congressional Review Act resolution. That's in the law. But the majority voted to ignore that provision of the law and raised one anyway. Then the Senate parliamentarian, through the chair, confirmed that these resolutions do not qualify. Why? What was the driving impetus here? Is it President Trump? Is it the fossil fuel industry and what they want? Or did you happen to just think changing these rules and the way the Senate operates was simply a good idea? I would love to hear you make that case. But I know that one of the results of last night's actions and today's votes is that Californians will be forced to breathe dirtier air than they should have to. California is being targeted for its leadership. It is that blatant, it is that obvious. Because yes, for over half a century, we've been the innovators and trailblazers in the fight against pollution. A little bit of a history refresher here. Back in 1966, California established the first tailpipe emission standard for passenger vehicles in the nation, responding to California's unique air quality needs with policy based on science and data. A year later, California established the California Air Resources Board to more comprehensively address the severe air pollution and its consequences. Then, some of you may remember, a catastrophic oil spill off the coast of Santa Barbara. Californians rose up and demanded stronger environmental protections. And this became the birth of the modern-day environmental movement and eventually the first Earth Day in 1970, which has grown in its recognition and celebration. Now, that same year, Congress passed the Clean Air Act on an overwhelming bipartisan basis. That original Clean Air Act authorized the waiver provision that allows California to set our own separate and more ambitious vehicle emission standards. Now, flash forward to the year 2006, when California passed the Global Warming Solutions Act, setting the bold goal of reducing emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2020. It was the first in the world set of goals to establish both the regulatory and market programs to achieve real-world reductions in the greenhouse gas emissions that were causing climate change. I remember it vividly because that same year I ran for state senate because I wanted to be part of crafting policies to actually achieve those goals and implementing those policies and programs. I went on to serve for 6 years as chair of the California State Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Communications. And since then, California has continued to lead the nation with increasingly ambitious goals for cutting emissions. It's a remarkable history when you stop and think about it, and especially when you recognize that it hasn't just been Democrats that have been driving this. As president, former California Senator Richard Nixon signed into law landmark legislation, including the National Environmental Policy Act, the Clean Air Act of 1970, the Endangered Species Act, and the creation of the EPA. Yes, folks watching at home, Republicans did that. As governor, Ronald Reagan established the California Air Resources Board, committing California to a comprehensive statewide approach to aggressively address air pollution in California. A Republican did that. It was Republican Governor Pete Wilson who established the California EPA. A Republican did that. And it was Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger who signed that 2006 Global Warming Solutions Act into law. A Republican did that. As a result of the bipartisan efforts, in 2025, California achieved a diverse portfolio of clean energy resources. Think not just conceptual, but actually operational solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, all while fostering the fourth largest economy in the world. And we have a plan to decarbonize nearly every sector of our economy, from transportation to electricity to manufacturing, agriculture, construction, and buildings. It's that long-term vision that's diversified our energy sources so that after seasons of extreme weather, we can still take advantage, more importantly, take advantage of hydropower opportunity after rainstorms, or reap the benefits of expanded wind and solar energy because we've grown our battery storage, technology, performance, and capabilities and capacity. Now here's where the rubber meets the road, colleagues. Most of you were not here last night in the wee hours of the morning when I explained that California, at the state and local level, have already done almost all they can to push the most ambitious regulatory agenda in the country to reduce emissions. They've done what they can from what's within their jurisdiction. We're investing in R&D into cleaner locomotives. We're investing in port electrification. We're making breakthroughs in hydrogen marine technologies like the first hydrogen fuel cell ferry in the United States. But despite all this progress, despite all this innovation, despite all this investment, we're still shy in too many regions of attaining federal clean air standards. Why? That's a logical question. If California is doing so much, why? Well, California's done everything it can, but the federal government has not. We need the federal government to do its part. Now, unless or until we have a federal government that says we need more ambitious goals and standards for the nation, then California needs and deserves the ability to lead for itself, to protect Californians. And that's why these waivers have been so important. Because absent the federal government doing its part, and I'm not holding my breath for the next 3.5 years waiting for the Trump EPA to do so, then California needs the federal waivers to get the job done. But I know that even after all this progress, the detractors will fall back on the same tired playbook of excuses. We know that the big oil industry sees California's clean cars and clean truck sales as existential threats. California has made tremendous advancements, not just in technology, but in markets. But that's why the fossil fuel industry has launched an all-out assault on California's rules. I'll give you just one example. If you happen to be reading the Wall Street Journal this past January, you might have picked up in an op-ed with the headline, quote, "Biden's EPA tries to put one over with EV mandate," end quote. That kind of sounds a little ominous. But if you read it, who the authors were, the authors went on to complain about how slow and laborious the process is for EPA to revoke a California waiver administratively. They literally tripped themselves up searching for every possible way to weaponize the Congressional Review Act to take down California's waivers. Now, who were those authors? The authors were partners at the law firm of Bowden Gray, who represent oil and gas clients and who were in court actively trying to repeal California's waivers. So it makes a whole lot of sense when you realize that they worked to publish this op-ed by June 8th, just 12 days before January 20th, when Donald Trump was sworn into his second term. And it's certainly no surprise that a month later, the EPA attempted to submit waivers as rules for congressional review, claiming that the Biden EPA had withheld them. Now, it's a little rich to accuse the Biden administration of withholding EPA waivers when the first Trump administration did the exact same thing. And so did every other EPA before it, both Republican and Democratic, in its entire 50-plus year history of the California waiver provision. In fact, when Donald Trump's EPA did what the Boyd and Gray lawyers told them to, submitting these waivers as rules to Congress, they actually still included language admitting that these were waivers and not rules. And when they were called on it, when it was pointed out, they had to go through the motions, do backflips, and resubmit the waivers to Congress. Ridiculous. Blatant. Now, regardless of how ludicrous this effort's been, we continue to hear all kinds of misinformation from detractors about why California's ambitious goals just won't work. I have a series of them, but I'll just focus on the main talking point that I've heard from my Republican colleagues and from industry, that California is somehow coercing other states into adopting California standards, or to let California do this is the equivalent of setting a national standard, or that these emission standards would become de facto national ones. That's ridiculous. We've made it clear, let California take care of Californians. If California had the power, the authority to set those national standards, trust me, we'd be doing this and a lot more. But we don't. But I think the good work that California has done that has benefited Californians, both our health and our economy, along with our environment, has inspired more than a dozen other states to follow California's lead voluntarily. Nobody's forcing other states, blue states or red states, to follow California's lead, but there's other states who see the benefits of what California is doing, and they choose to do so to protect their residents and to protect their environment. And lastly, let me just conclude by stating something that has conveniently been stifled in this whole debate, limited debate and conversation. So who benefits from all this? It's not unleashing job creation and innovation in states, in the other 49 states but California. It's holding our nation back in terms of improving air quality and our transition to a clean energy economy. The winner here is actually China, because like it or not, the clean energy boom globally is happening. And we have a big say in who leads it and who benefits from it. Is it the United States? Not by the leadership and the policies I've seen of this administration in the near future. It can be California, but it seems like you're more interested in taking our tools away. And so now we risk China jumping ahead both economically and technologically in this space. So I'll remind you folks, but because of California's leaning in on addressing the emissions, pollution, and climate challenges, California has become the fourth largest economy in the world. We have proven that what's good for clean air is good for business and the economy, and that is something that y'all to replicate and scale up, not fear and stifle. We have to be able to do both, protect our planet, strengthen our economy. California has shown us the way. We can have reliable cars. Our kids can breathe clean air. We can invest in our economy and in our future. California has been proud to fill the role of national leader in this space. We will continue to try to do anything and everything we can to do so, both for our interest and for the nation's. But what's happened these last 24 hours makes the job that much harder. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from California.
Madam President, members, welcome to the Roaring Twenties. Not the ones you may have read about in F. Scott Fitzgerald novels, not the ones with jazz and liberation and industrial boom. I mean these Roaring Twenties, the ones where instead of flappers you get fossil fuel and dirty air, where instead of innovation you get obstruction, tariffs, isolationism, blinding nostalgia for a world that no longer exists. Instead of leaders who want to tackle the climate crisis head on, you get votes to tear down the tools that we need to fight it. The reason I stand here today and was here last night until 1:32 in the morning is that Senate Republicans have pushed through resolutions to revoke California's authority to set its own vehicle emissions standards, to set its own rules about what kind of air we breathe in California. This is an authority that my state has had by statute for more than 50 years. We've had the right to deal with our unique problems of congestion, our topography, our smog. We've had the right to demand of ourselves cleaner air for ourselves and for our children. And that is under attack right now, and not just California's ability to set its standards to protect its people, but because other states have also followed California's lead, this will affect the quality of air all around the country. And that is the gravamen of the problem for my colleagues in the GOP, and that is that it's not just California, it's the fact that so many other states have followed our lead. So many other states have decided they'd rather have fewer cancers than more cars with the combustion engines. That was their choice. That was their right. They weren't coerced into joining California. They made the decision about what was best for their constituents. And it is not for us in this body to arrogate to ourselves to decide we know better for Californians or we know better for people in other states than what their own leaders have decided about the quality of their air. This is a direct attack not only on my state, but on our ability to innovate, to lead, and indeed to breathe clean air. This is bad policy, clearly, certainly, yes, but it is also a dangerous abuse of the process in this House that will lead to other harmful consequences. To get this done, to repeal California's statutory waiver to set its own air pollution rules, Republican leadership have decided to blow a procedural hole in the filibuster. And let's call it what it is. This is a dangerous new kind of nuclear option that dispenses with the filibuster, but they would have us believe only here, only when it's necessary to cater to the oil industry. It is the oil exception to the filibuster rule. Now, the nuclear option has been used over nominees in the past, and there has been debate about doing away with the filibuster entirely. But today, what we're talking about is only carving out the oil industry from the filibuster. So not carving out protection for voting rights, not carving out protection for reproductive freedom, not carving out fundamental rights for the American people, for which there would be a strong case to have a carve-out from the filibuster. But no, today we're talking about an oil industry-only carve-out. And they're using it to overturn some of the most successful clean air policies in American history. Since the 1960s, California has had the obligation and the ability and the authority to lead, and they've used it. We've used it to reduce pollution, to increase fuel efficiency, and drive innovation across the country. And much of the country has California to thank for the development of electric vehicles, for the improvement in fuel efficiency standards, because as we have led, others have followed, and industry has adapted. Despite the naysayers and those always saying it's too hard, it can't be done, America got cleaner cars thanks to California, and consumers got more choices thanks to California. Now, some in this chamber want to go back in time, not because the policy failed, but because it succeeded. Imagine if just after Henry Ford unveiled the Model T, Congress passed a resolution demanding we double down on bigger, stronger horses. Because that's what this is, a deliberate attempt to deny the future because it threatens the status of big oil. The president says that he is for energy independence. That's our mantra. Make America energy independent. But that is not what they're doing. They're killing clean energy all over the country. You know what just came out of the House in the dead of night last night in their reconciliation bill, their big ugly bill? A provision to essentially kill every clean energy project in the country that's not almost all finished. If it isn't going to be operational in a very short period of time, they want to pull the plug. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that when, in fact, most of those projects are in red states, not blue ones, not states like California, but states like Indiana and Kentucky? Why would they do that? Because the obligation here is not to their state or constituents. The obligation here is to the oil industry. They would sacrifice the jobs in the clean energy industry all over the country to their own constituents. They would put those people out of work. And why? Because of fealty to the oil industry. This is not about energy independence. It is about oil dependence. Today, we are in a full transition to a clean transportation future, or we could be. And Senate Republicans are trying to bring back the smog. They're trying to make America smoggy again. We're seeing the climate crisis, and they're trying to cut the brake lines on progress. We're literally standing at the gates of the future, a future that we will lead or China will lead, a renewable energy future, and some would rather turn it all around and ride off in a horse and buggy. Because that's what this vote means. That's what these votes mean. Not just being stuck in a past technology, beholden to an old way of doing things, but also stuck in a dirtier and more toxic world. Millions will be stuck breathing in hazardous emissions unnecessarily. What is the pay for here? What is the pay for this gift to the oil industry? Cancer. Cancer is the pay for. We will pay for this repeal of clean air rules with cancer. Maybe your cancer, maybe your father's cancer, maybe your sister's cancer, maybe your child's cancer. That will be the pay for. Because this is about power, and it's about profit, and it's about punishing states that dare to lead. It's about undermining the Senate's own rules to score a short-term win that will do long-term damage, but will placate the oil industry. Because once you start twisting the CRA into a weapon to attack anything you don't like, rules, waivers, facts, you don't just hurt California, you hurt the country. Because don't think for a second it ends here. If this gambit works, it will not be the last time this tactic is used. Today, we blow a hole in the filibuster for the oil industry. Tomorrow, we blow another hole in the filibuster for what other polluting industry? Or more broadly, should we expect this majority to use it to strip away protections for workers or privacy rights or reproductive freedom? This is the real fight here, not just over emissions or waivers or vehicles, but whether we are a nation led by and empowered to shape the future or held hostage by the past. The Roaring '20s were a time of reckless optimism. The stock market soared, inequality deepened, and political leaders told Americans not to worry, everything was under control. Until it wasn't. Because the same decade that gave us jazz and swing also gave us the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, a disastrous attempt to protect American industry by walling off our economy to the rest of the world. It sparked global retaliation, strangled trade, and helped turn a market crash into a full-blown depression. And what are we seeing now? New tariffs, retaliation threats, political attacks on states that lead, and now an attempt to tear down environmental progress and green innovation, just as the global economy is demanding more of it, much more of it. The Roaring '20s gave us invention, yes, but also illusion. A false belief that we could grow forever without rules and without consequences. We are in danger of making the same mistake again. We should be building the EV infrastructure for the future, not dismantling climate progress. We should be investing in clean energy, not clinging to combustion engines. We should be protecting the rules of this chamber, not torching them when they become inconvenient to the oil industry. The gutting of these norms doesn't end in prosperity. The sacrifice of clean air doesn't end in making us healthy again. It ends in cancer. It ends in an enfeebled economy. It ends in a country going backward and shrinking in on itself. It ends in crisis. Let's not go there. I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida.
Madam President, I stand today to condemn the anti-Semitic and hate-fueled murders of Yaron Lachinsky and Sarah Milgram that occurred last night at the hands of a Hamas sympathizer. This was a sickening, violent, and anti-Semitic attack in our nation's capital. These two young professionals were targeted and murdered because they represented Israel and the Jewish people, with their murderer chanting, "Free Palestine," after killing them in cold blood. These were innocent, out for a night together at the Capitol Jewish Museum here in D.C., just like members of our own staff do each and every week. This anti-Semitism and hate for Israel and the Jewish people is disgusting, unacceptable, and must be condemned on every level. It's despicable and it's dangerous. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel hate since the October 7, 2023 attacks. We've seen Hamas sympathizers take over college campuses and instill fear into Jewish students. We've seen violent protests on our streets and now in our nation's capital. Jewish Americans are afraid to walk outside or live their daily lives. For nearly 600 days now, Israel has defended itself against Iran-backed Hamas terrorists who want to destroy Israel and destroy the Jewish people. These terrorists murder babies and women in cold blood, take and murder innocent people, and brag about their acts with no remorse. They took innocent people, including Americans, hostage and tortured them. They still hold the bodies of American hostages to deprive their families of closure. Israel is the United States' greatest democratic ally in the Middle East. We cannot abandon our ally. Thankfully, we have a president who is an ally of Israel and is working to fight anti-Semitism in the United States. President Trump is pushing back on colleges and universities that allow hateful anti-Semitic actions on campus that threaten the safety of Jewish students. He has appointed the most pro-Israel cabinet ever assembled. He is committed to defending Israel, combating terrorism, and protecting Jewish Americans. Today, I rise to condemn last night's heinous and anti-Semitic attack on these innocent people. I condemn this hateful rhetoric against Israel and against the Jewish people, who deserve the right to live freely and without fear in the United States and around the world. The United States must always stand with Israel and the Jewish people, and today we join together to remember the innocent lives taken in an act of hate and pay tribute to their lives and the contributions of the Jewish people to our nation. The fight against anti-Semitism is a bipartisan one. I am grateful for my colleague Jacky Rosen for working with me to draft a resolution that draws attention to anti-Semitism in America and declaring May Jewish American Heritage Month. I yield to my colleague from Nevada, Senator Rosen.
Oops, there we go. Didn't need the microphone. Well, I want to begin by thanking my colleague from Florida for his bipartisanship and his partnership in moving to pass this bipartisan resolution to recognize American Jewish Heritage Month by unanimous consent. I also want to take a moment to speak about the horrific murders that took place last night. Like so many other Jews in America and around the world, I woke up this morning heartbroken by the news of yet another unspeakable act of anti-Semitic violence that occurred late last night. This time in our nation's capital, less than 1 mile from where I'm standing this very moment. The shooting occurred outside of the Jewish Capitol Museum, where the American Jewish Committee was holding a large event, and the shooter went there specifically to target and kill Jews and people who he perceived to be Jewish. This anti-Semitism, plain and simple. There's no justification in the world for carrying out or condoning this violent and vile hate crime. It's pure anti-Semitic violence. My heart is shattered for the 2 Israeli embassy workers who were killed, Yaron and Sarah, taken from us far, far too soon. Both committed to public service, social action, peace, the betterment of the world. They were a young couple in love. I've read reports that Yaron was planning to propose to Sarah next week in Israel. They were cruelly taken from us far too soon at the beginning of their lives. May their memory be for a blessing, and may their killer be brought to swift justice. It's a tragedy that these innocent lives cut short by hate, and it continues to be a tragedy that these incidents continue to occur in the United States and all over the world. Over the last few years alone, we've seen anti-Semitic hate, extremist violence. They've done nothing but increase across this country. All over America, Jewish people, we've been threatened, beaten, verbally accosted, we've been killed just because of our faith, just because of who they are, because of who we are. We've seen horrendous anti-Semitic incidents and attacks on Jewish communities, at schools and on college campuses, on Jewish-owned places of business, and on synagogues and places of worship. And incidents of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and globally have risen dramatically since Hamas's brutal terrorist attack on October 7th. All of it is wrong. It has no place in our country, no place in our society, no place in the world. Those who commit these egregious acts, they want to send a message. They want to terrorize Jews, they want to scare Jews, they want to intimidate us, and it's vital that we all stand up together and send a clear and forceful message. And the message is this: we will not be afraid. We will not be afraid. We cannot be silent. There's desperate need to confront dangerous and growing anti-Semitism in our country, around the world, to show that bigoted efforts to intimidate us will not work. We cannot be afraid. We cannot be silent. And that's why I'm here in the Senate floor today. By passing this resolution and recognizing Jewish American Heritage Month, we are not just celebrating the numerous accomplishments and contributions that Jews have made to our country. We are sending the message back, a message that Jewish people have a place in America, that this is our home as well, that our lives, well, that they have value and they have meaning, just like anyone else, and that our country stands with it. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to allow this resolution to pass, and I want to thank Senator Scott of Florida for his partnership in the effort to counter anti-Semitism and hate everywhere. So, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 246 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 246, recognizing the significance of Jewish American Heritage Month and calling on elected officials and civil society leaders to counter anti-Semitism.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, thank you to all my colleagues for passing this important resolution unanimously today. I yield the floor.
Madam President,
Senator from Mississippi.
I know of no further business and suggest that we proceed to a vote.
Is there further debate on the joint resolution? If not, the clerk will read the title for the third time.
HJ Res 89, Joint Resolution providing congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code and so forth.
The question is on passage of the joint resolution. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin,